Shabbat Shalom, Temple Israel. Good morning. I hope this finds everyone in good health and in good spirits as we approach another Shabbat together. This world has been crazy and chaotic for a long time, and yet there is so much going on in our lives that are not COVID related, but that just have to do with humanity and the need for humanity to take care of one another. When it comes to the notion of Black and brown lives in our world, it is something that we must talk about because in our country, in America, they are not being treated the way that all human beings should be treated. I found an article by Michael Johnston, who is the CEO of the Jewish Community Foundation in Hartford, Connecticut, and I wanted to talk a little bit about his words. He says that as brown and Black people are being killed by police in numbers indicating an ongoing and widespread pattern of bias and violence, it is only based on the color of their skin that these young men and women are losing their lives. Police officers targeted and murdered in act of revenge violence, protests by Black Lives Matter, and supporters that are demanding justice and change. And there's this word justice, tzedek. This word comes up over and over again within our Jewish community. It's this understanding of our obligation to help and to repair the world, tzedakah, the act of pursuing justice. It is commanded of us. And this week as we receive the Torah from Shavuot, we are reminded it is our job to constantly pursue justice. Surrounding much of the anxiety around our deteriorating race relations, a counter movement has surfaced that uses the phrase, all life matters. While well-intended, this too has increased the level of anxiety in communities of color across the country. You might ask why. At a difficult time, doesn't it make sense that we should send the message that each of us is a unique creation of God, B'Tselem Elohim, created in God's own image, that each of our lives matter? It is, of course, inherently true that the Jewish view of the world is that each and every life matters. In our view, it is equally tragic that innocent police officers and innocent young African-American men lose their lives to violence. It is not what God intended for humanity. But this attempt to reinforce a universal principle misses the point. All lives do matter. It's well-intended. It's well-intentioned. But this sentiment does not acknowledge, nor does it move us closer to resolving the specific problem at hand. If we are to generalize that all life matters, then this issue takes focus unintentionally away from the dominant inequality in our country. Here's an analogy to help us think about this, again from Michael Johnston. Imagine you're eating out at a restaurant with friends, and while everyone else gets a plate of food, you don't get any. You speak up, hey, I should get my fair share. And in response, the waiter says, yes, everyone should get their fair share, but still doesn't give you any food. While the sentiment that everyone should get their fair share is reasonable, the injustice affecting you has not registered with the waiter, and more importantly, you still don't have food. To cure a particularized injustice, we must both speak and act. As a people, we have our own experiences with the dire consequence of inaction. We understand that the potentially disastrous consequences of the majority remaining silent in the face of bias against the minority can cause death, and far worse, it can cause generational loss of not just life, but of spirit. An amazing poem that I'm sure many of you have heard. First, they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. This Martin Niemöller poem reminds us to understand that there are consequences to our silence. I don't know how we have found ourselves in this situation as a nation, but it requires our attention now. I also believe it's important to reject a polarized dialogue, an us versus them dichotomy. One can believe that most police officers are good people with good intent without denying the existence of institutionalized bias that must be urgently recognized and addressed. the data convincingly argues that innocent lives are at stake and are being lost. While all lives do matter, and Judaism promotes this idea, enforces this idea, and asks us to elevate this idea to holy, in this situation that our country is facing now, Black and brown lives specifically matter, because remaining silent in the face of injustice can't be acceptable to a people who have suffered from the silence of others. It's not a problem just for the people of color. It is a problem for our entire nation. And a problem for the Jewish community as well, who, despite our current relative comfortable place in American society, are always vulnerable to a resurgence of anti-Semitism. Remaining silent also cannot be an option if we truly believe in tikkun olam, in repairing our world. We cannot have a whole or holy world unless all of us live in a freedom without fear, equal in God's eyes. This article by Michael Johnston is only elevated more when I turned to a friend's Facebook page this morning who lives in Minnesota. Yesterday, I went with my kids and we passed a gathering of people standing and praying for the memory of George Floyd. I decided to change our plans and stand with them. My kids didn't want to go. Their argument, us showing up wouldn't do anything. It's too hot. It's boring. A good reminder to me, she says, that a white person's anti-racist journey never ends. As a white person raising white kids, I need to teach them constant vigilance to how our skin impacts how we walk through this world. And she ends, I have, but clearly not enough. I also probably have not added enough conversations about sexism, homophobia, Islamophobia, ableism, classism, and oppression. I join my voice as your rabbi to this voice of Angie Frank and this voice of Michael Johnston by saying, no, I am not a person of color. I do not have brown or black skin, but I am a person of this world, and I understand that silence is not an option. This Shabbat, and going forward from this Shabbat onward, we may not remain silent, no matter what group, no matter what individual or what soul is being put down because of the us versus them mentality. We are us, we are them, we have been it all. From our slavery to our freedom, from the Exodus to Shavuot of receiving our Torah, we may never remain silent, because when we do, we lose our connection to each other, to this world, and to God. May we be blessed as we go into this Shabbat with a greater understanding of how we are all responsible for one another. Kol Yisrael aravim zel hazeh, all of Israel is responsible for one another. Kol ha'olam, all of this world is responsible for one another. May we continue to be blessed. May we continue to spread our blessings over those who don't feel the blessings that surround them. Shabbat Shalom.